Okay, I'm gonna get started. So I'm Samantha Springer. Everyone might know me, but if not, I'm the director here at the Kenai Chamber of Commerce. And this is our first lecture for 2025. I'm not gonna be putting up any slides. This is gonna be more like a TED Talk, though I'm pretty sure that's copyright, so it's not. It's a Sam Talk. So a big thing is, so how many people in here manage people right now? And the ones who don't, you are planning toward management? Okay.
Always have something on your belt.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I always love to ask this question: who has had a terrible manager in their life? You remember their name probably, right? You don't remember their name?
No.
Oh, you don't hold grudges. I like
Oh,
that.
I hold
You remember their face?
No, they're irrelevant to me, is why they don't even matter
Oh,
anymore.
wow.
I don't give them space.
That's a savage response. I like that. Most people remember terrible managers, right? Do you remember a manager who made you want to become a better person or a leader? Now, I have had a lot of managers in my life. I don't know how many jobs I've had. There's a whole lot that I don't know and I don't remember because they made no difference, positive or negative, in my life. And I think that's really important to remember if you're going to be in a role where you're leading people, where you're managing, what kind of manager are you going to be? What kind of leader do you want to be? And if you don't want to make a difference in someone's life in those positions, why are you in those positions, right? Because to me, I put here, so leadership versus management. Does anyone know what the difference is between those two things?
What if you're leading?
Not necessarily. Anybody else? So by definition, leadership is more about setting a vision, inspiring others, influencing people towards shared goals, whereas management is more considered about organizing, planning, and executing goals, right? There's a fine balance to having both, where you can be a very organized and successful manager, but are you inspiring your staff as well? That's something to kind of think about, because I do think that depending on your role and how much interaction you have with your staff is going to dictate how your staff responds to you and what you will inspire them to do in the future. So again, do you want to be someone who they look up to you as a mentor, or someone that they regret having to see every day? And that's your decision, like, honestly. And if you want to be the person they don't want to see, then again, maybe management's not the right place for you. Effective communication is probably one of the most important things you can have as a manager. You want to make sure that, one, you're providing clear communication, that you're providing what you actually want from your staff. There should never be a point where your staff is guessing what they should be doing. If they're comfortable talking to you, it should never be an issue, because if you are the person that they directly report to and they don't feel comfortable talking to you, you've created a hostile work environment, which we'll get to later. It goes back to conflict resolution, which I don't know. Was anyone in my conflict resolution class last year? Yeah. So, and that doesn't just include skills like active listening. Are you giving the full attention? Like, are we making eye contact? If Brittany comes, I'm gonna use Brittany because you're gonna play. If she comes into my office and I never look at her once and I just keep typing away at my computer, there's no way she's gonna feel like I am giving her any attention whatsoever, let alone caring what she's bringing to the table. So take the time, if your staff comes in, to talk to them and actually interact, or say, hey, I am slammed right now, can we schedule time later? Because at least then you're recognizing that obviously they want to talk about something, but you might not have time. But again, active listening is really important. Nonverbal communication is so important. If she walks in my office and immediately I go, she might just walk right back out.
I would.
She has. We all have bad days, right? Nobody's perfect. But what signs are you sending? Like, are you open to your staff, or are you presenting a situation where if you get that response every single time, how often do you think your staff is going to come to you when they have a question or need something? So, I mean, are most of you in the same office as your staff, or, yeah? No. So nonverbal might not be the same for you, but it is for the majority of people who are in the same building. Like, you have to watch those cues, and you'll see, you'll see a trend when you start, if you do that consistently, you're gonna, get the same from your staff. If your staff, every time you walk up to them, gives you attitude or has bad body language, you're gonna respond to that if it's a frequent activity. So we should be held to the same standards as managers, right? Yeah.
No, I just have a question. I have a savant in my office, and nothing melds the same with them as far as communication goes, as far as like reciprocating stuff. They're just, you can't read anything.
Yeah.
They don't care to read you, and they tune out, and it's not an intentional thing.
Sure.
It's the way that they're made, and so it's kind of like you're navigating that all the time, and it's a very strange thing. Do you have any recommendations for that?
Well, I think
I've read all kinds of stuff about savants, and it's like,
so. Here's the thing. I treat every person that I've ever had employed under me completely different, because every single person responds differently. Some need praise, some need structure, some need freedom. So it's just, you have to find that balance of where you can connect with them in order to manage them appropriately. You can't manage everybody in a straight line anyway, because everyone works so different and needs such different response. Like, I personally, as an employee, have never really needed praise. Like, I enjoy doing my job. If I'm doing it correctly, I like to understand what I'm doing wrong, and I do like hearing what was done right, but I don't necessarily need additional praise on top of that, if that makes sense. Now, I have had to learn as a manager to realize that people do need praise. Like, there's staff that do need that. And so that's something that I've had to build into, rather than everything just being like boop, 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 boop. Like, don't forget, again, I'll pick on Brittany. Brittany, she did it above and beyond. Like, give her the recognition. Natalie, she went above and beyond. Give her the recognition, because it is important to some, and some don't care. Yes.
As an employee, I would like to add, asking your employees what they value is important, so that way you know. Like, if it's not apparent, ask.
Well, and you will start to notice too, if you are, because again, Brittany, I'm so sorry.
I'm a praise person, I know.
She's a
that's
praise
why
person, but we had a gap in communication when she first started, because in the same way, she wouldn't tell me if she needed something. So we were like at this weird standstill where I'm like, she seems upset with me. And she's like, she seems upset with me. And both of us were like, what's happening, right? And then eventually we just talked, and it was like, oh, okay, you don't have enough communication from me. I'm not giving you enough feedback. And then I think we're in a pretty good place now where we can both tell each other, and Natalie, you've been really easy.
I jump right into your office and tell you what I need, or I text you. It doesn't matter where you are.
And that's not to say, again, every employee is different, right? So you have to structure how you work with people based on that. And again, that is a really good point. You should ask, what helps you be motivated at your job? That's an easy thing to ask somebody when they start, when you're interviewing even, because it might be something that is unrealistic too, that you could be like, no, we don't do that here, before you even hire them. Building trust, and that goes right back into communication, right? I want my staff to trust my integrity as an employer and my choices. I also have to trust them to do their jobs, right? So how do we build trust? Again, be transparent, be honest, be consistent in your actions. don't say one thing and then do another. Because again, if you're leading an organization, then you are leading by example. And if you aren't following your own rules, then what's the point in having them? So, and of course there's always going to be exceptions. You have a different job than they do, right? But we're talking about like basic level things that if you're expecting them to do it, you should probably be following the same rules. And that will build trust. And again, just the integrity and empathy plays into that as well. I think that you have to be understanding, again, that's understanding each employee, how they feel, whether or not they are feeling appreciated, understood. The basic things that all humans require is no different outside of a relationship than it is in a managerial role, right? Does anyone have any questions so far? I'm moving through. Okay, I just want to make sure. Anybody ever heard of the SMART acronym? Did you guys use it?
I did it my previous job.
Okay. So when you're setting clear expectations for your employees, it's basically specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Now, whether that's something that you use personally or it's something actually like in your, handbook, it's not in our handbook. It's just something I learned a long time ago, that when you're setting expectations for your employees, they should meet all those things. They should be specific so that nobody is unclear of what tasks that they have to do, what the steps are. They have to be measurable because why are we assigning tasks if we can't figure out if they're even worth doing, right? Achievable, if you set an expectation that they can't complete, you're setting them up for failure. So again, this goes back into why are we doing that? Relevant, does it make sense for what you're doing? And time-bound is really important. I need this by this day, without just saying, hey, at some point I need you to do this. And that's basically what that is. And again, this all goes back to effective communication, right? It's just, I don't even remember where I learned the SMART. I probably never even said it to you, huh? I don't know if I learned that in college. I feel like I learned that at some corporate job.
Parenting.
Parenting. That I am not using the SMART acronym in parenting. My children rule me. Delegation. I don't know about you guys, but I have a hard time delegating tasks. That is a personal flaw, Sarah. I am working on it really hard, but I want to bring it up because it is really important to delegate the things you can out, so you're not just, you don't get to just, don't laugh at me. So, again, I'm really bad at delegating but I will take on so much to the point where I go home and I'm like, nobody talk to me and I just want to throw the covers over my head. Delegation is really important. Not only is it important if for some reason you leave your role and your staff is there to carry the weight, then they might know some of the things that you do. But also, so you're not carrying the weight of the organization on your shoulders at all times. And whether that's just delegating parts or pieces of things or an actual whole project, like Job Shadow Day, where I was like, Natalie, you're taking over Job Shadow Day. Liam did it before you, and I'm not doing it. Now, did I have SMART for her? No, because I didn't even know all the details. But I gave her, like, who did it before, they worked it out, and she's doing a great job with it. So, same with the visitor guide. Like, could I sit there and do that stuff? Yeah. Do I have time for it? No, not even close. So delegation is really important. Conflict resolution again. So there's never a point in my career where there's not been conflict in a workplace. I don't know anyone who has ever not had a conflict with a manager or a employee or a coworker. Like, has anyone ever worked somewhere where there wasn't at least a conflict of some sort? I'm not talking like major blowout, but like, can anyone say they haven't worked somewhere where there's a conflict? Yeah, I don't think so. So it is inevitable. But it's also, you can also work through these things. And this goes back to communication. If there's a conflict and you notice it as a manager and it has nothing to do with you, I would resolve it as fast as you can in any way that you need to. Because it might be, and this didn't happen to these two, but I'm just gonna make up an example. So they have an office together. They're not talking. You walk into the room and they'll only turn their chairs like this so that they can look at you, but still not see the other person back to back. Do you ignore that? Because you're like, oof, I don't want to deal with that. Or do you go, hey guys, maybe we should, you guys want to have lunch one day and like sit down and chat? Like take them out of the normal environment where they're, you know, they have their desk and they're safe and they're like, right? Bring them out of that and then start asking the questions of, hey, I noticed there's some tension in the office. Like, is there something, and if they still won't talk then you pull them separately, try and figure out what's going on, but you can't let that fester. It won't go away on its own. You can't ignore it. You can for a little bit, but realistically, you can't ignore it if you want your organization to continue to function properly. Two people that sit in the same office probably have to interact with each other. Has anyone else dealt with a situation like that?
All the time.
Yeah. So what have you done?
Well, usually it's, for example, at my lodge, and you have a chef and a sous chef, and it doesn't matter, they always have issues.
Yeah.
And I have tried everything that I can think of to resolve it. And what it's come down to is just one of the people is not coming back, because I don't want the main person to have continual problems with the dynamics of the two of them. Unfortunately, still one person is out of job.
Sure.
Because try as I might to, you know, intervene and discuss with them, okay, you know, what do you feel your job is? What do you feel your job is? Why are you guys clashing in the kitchen? Oh, you don't feel like he's doing his dishes, you're having to do his dishes, or he's not cleaning things right, or he's getting in the way when you're prepping food, you know, what can we do to mitigate all of that? And even try as you might to try to mitigate a lot of that. Sometimes people just are oil and water. They just do not come together. And unfortunately, you have to choose who is the more valuable asset, and the other person has to go.
Well, and that's a tricky situation too, because as a seasonal, like, they have to be on it. Like,
Yeah.
there's no, you don't even have a choice in that situation, so, yeah,
And
unfortunately.
in thinking about like being an employee, I haven't been an employee per se since I was 12.
Wow.
I mean, I've always, like,
Yeah.
once I was 13, I was working on fishing boats, and I was my own kind of, I really answered to many people, like there'd be a skipper, but, you
Yeah.
know, but then after that, I've been my own boss,
Yeah.
you know, running, by the time I was 18, I had a crew of 380 people.
That's crazy.
So,
That
but,
sounds awful.
but now I still haven't been an employee
Right,
of anything, so it's kind of a different mindset.
right. So you're always in the
I'm always,
manager
I'm
role.
always, yeah, the boss
Yeah.
or the owner.
Mhm.
And so it makes it differ, it makes it a lot different trying to deal with everybody's emotions and how everybody's feeling, and it's like at some point, you kind of feel like, okay, this is too much drama, you know?
Do you think that makes you less patient toward the situation over time because you've seen so much of it, you know, being in that position? Or do you think that it's opened your eyes to more ways that you can resolve things, or are you just like,
You know, I think it's changed through time.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I was really hardworking. I didn't have a whole lot of patience for stuff. But with time comes life experience, and then you get to where you have more compassion for people at different stages in their lives. And being old like I am, I think that I've seen enough of life that I do, when people come to me with a problem, I have an example somewhere in my life that I can
Sure.
be more compassionate toward it. You know, but I think everybody has their point where enough's enough kind of thing. But I find that with time, that's just evolved.
yeah,
So, and I don't know I have any more skill sets because I think I'm pretty rigid, and that comes from just being old school. And so the climate of, some of the current climates don't jive with me at all because I am too rigid, but it's but it's always worked for me. I mean, that's always been the way I've done things, and so people that I work with usually know that for me, like, these are my clear expectations. You know, if you can't do this, tell me why, what we need to do different. But I've always been willing 100% to do anything I ask someone to do. I've always been willing to do it right next to them, if not doing more than what they do.
I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone else have examples of how they've dealt with conflict?
Another thing that's different is the size of the company you work for. So I
Totally.
work for, I've been a manager at Fred Meyer, which was corporate, and then the state of Alaska, and now a small business. So it's a lot different, like with the state of Alaska, I mean, I was friendly and all that with everybody, but you don't get to know them. Like, I trained all the people in every office throughout the state for the DMV. So, like, I knew their names, and I still, will chat with them and stuff, but you didn't get to know them. And whereas my team now is pretty much like my family. Like, so it's a lot different depending on the, like, small business versus corporate type of career. So, because I led very differently with the state, which is where I live in Smart River. I led very differently from the state than I do with small business.
And the evolution of it has been really interesting through the years. Back in the 70s, when the U.S. started more of their trade with Japan, I used to go over and work with Sony and Panasonic, and a friend of mine was an interpreter, so we would meet with them and discuss ways to integrate U.S. business people versus the Japanese with their customs. And what was interesting is I sat in a room with 20 Japanese people that all worked in the same office, and in talking to them, found out that they'd worked together for 30 and 40 years, and they knew nothing about each other. Like, they never even knew that this person was married or had kids, because that just, in their culture, you don't sit there and chit chat and get to know someone at work. You're
That's what it's
there
like with the state.
only, you're there only to work. So it's very, I mean, as my life has evolved, that has changed.
Yeah, gosh, I know way too much about these guys.
So much, you would know nothing, that they just lost their life
much.
or anything. You would never know.
Yeah,
It wasn't even allowed to have that emotion in the workplace. You had to be consistent every day, no matter what, and you couldn't let anything in your life affect it, but you never sat around and talked to those people about anything other than business and work.
oh gosh.
There's a lot
We
more
would implode.
politically correct.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's so
Culture
many, like,
shock
we make
and
joke, like, we joke with each other stuff
Right.
here, like, it's like friends. Whereas with the state, every single thing you say could be offensive to one person,
Oh.
but a joke, friendly with another. So, like, it's definitely different, again, in that same realm where
Right.
now that it's a relaxed, relaxed, we still have professionalism, but it's a lot different.
Well, you
Like,
don't
I
have
know
an
their
HR
lives, I know
department
their
either.
partners, I know, yeah.
And with bigger companies, you have HR, and all of a sudden, as an owner or as a manager, you become the HR specialist in a small business, which you don't have the training for.
Right. And it's
I
funny
would say
too,
that. I don't have
sometimes
a
I'll
training.
be like joking and I'll just duck behind them like, hi, I'm an HR now.
Yeah.
What can I help you with? Oh, a complaint against me? Okay, I'll take note.
You see that box over there?
Yeah.
Or the garbage can, there's where you put those.
I think it's, again, it's at different levels, depends on how many employees you got, but better you know your employees. Then you start learning their strengths and their weaknesses. And some people may be very good at the office part and managers, but maybe they're not a good trainer, or maybe they're not a good teacher. So if you can learn your employees' strengths and weaknesses and put them in places where they can be successful, they're gonna feel more empowered in doing things. But also there's jobs that, this person maybe isn't as good a teacher or trainer, but there's nobody else to do it, and that person's willing to do it, and they're probably gonna get better if they're motivated and become better at those jobs. But if you can learn people, it's kind of what you said, you bring in people out, sit at the table, talk to them. If you can start learning their strengths and weaknesses, what they like to do, what they don't, and you can incorporate those things into their job assignments or their job, I think you're gonna have more productive employees and being producers for you.
I agree. Yeah, and one thing about, we always joke at a nonprofit that like what 90% of our job is other duties as assigned. But what we've done actually the last couple times is change the job descriptions when new staff come on. Because especially in this position, or in a nonprofit, you only have so many staff that you can bring on. So when you start to see what people's strengths and weaknesses are, you can change their job description to fit that and move things around. We have a lot of flexibility with that. You don't always have that in corporate, obviously. It's very structured. But here, I mean, we change job descriptions all the time.
Because I didn't like the word.
Yeah, I know. Because they don't like the name of their role. It's fine. We love getting new business cards. We just get less of them.
What? I don't remember. That word
I
is
have
dead
notes.
to me.
It was pretty funny. We should have recorded it. It was really interesting, actually. But again, why try and fit someone to a mold that they don't fit when you can fit the mold to the person? Like, we don't have to be exactly what a job description says if somebody's better for the role than just because it's under Natalie's job description, Brittany can do it. So we fixed it, we put the pieces where they need to go. And then we took pieces off that nobody needed specifically to do. Everyone can do certain things. It doesn't have to be assigned to one person. I have to oversee it, but there's lots of ways to be flexible with your employees and still get the most. And I feel like then you really are, one, you're learning who your employees are. You are setting the expectation of what you need them to absolutely do, and then you're also taking their opinion into account of what are their strengths in their opinion. And then you can always revisit if you're like, yeah, you thought that was your strength, but like, was it? Like, are we really there? But so far it's been great. But it's not just been with the current staff. We did that with previous staff members too, where the job description changed with the person. So, and again, I have the flexibility to do that in a nonprofit because of how small it is. That's not always an option, but it is good to know what people believe their strengths are. And sometimes you can actually, let them know about other strengths that they might not even realize that they are good at, like public speaking or training. They might not even realize that they are really good at teaching until you were like overhearing them explain something to someone, you're like, that's way more detailed than I would have done. And that's not even something you expect. So it's really good to kind of pay attention to those things so that you can use those resources, because again, in our situation, we only have so many staff. So everybody has a million hats. And I know some organizations have a role for every single thing, but that's not usually the case in Alaska, especially even in corporate. I remember I used to work for a beverage company, name names, and I was the district manager for the entire Kenai Peninsula, but I also had to merchandise product and sell, which is a really weird combination because there's not enough time in a day for that. But that's not normal outside of Alaska. Like, you'd never see that organization do that in Washington or California. It just wouldn't happen. So, and this, again, a lot of these things are not. Yeah.
When you talk about job descriptions,
Mhm.
I think when you put job descriptions down, they better be pretty broad range, because of just what you're talking about is you want people to come into your business, you hire them to be producers in the business, and you can't cover everything in a job description.
No, it's impossible.
I mean, and maybe at the end, duties assigned.
That's what's on every single one of our job
Because-
descriptions. My job is literally just says other duties as assigned.
I mean, this might be your basic job, but just what you said, there's a whole ton of stuff comes up, and somebody has to take care of it. And you're hiring these people to be producers. You want them to be producers and to help move things along. So, anyway,
Yeah.
job descriptions and duties assigned.
On that point, how long do these people last when they're overloaded? They don't last very long. They quit. I've seen vendors over the years just not even last a year or two.
That's why I try and be really transparent in the hiring process of how strange working in a nonprofit is. That there's no way I could ever explain to, Natalie's finance. So I was like, when I hired her, I was like, so this is what you'll be in charge of, and we do events, so you're gonna have to help run marathons. And it was a weird job interview, right? Where it
Yeah.
was like, there's all these additional events that have nothing to do with your job, but we need you to do them, and
Yeah.
but it was part of the discussion before we even hired, because I don't want anyone to be surprised when they start and they're like, I just do finance, and you're like, no, you're actually an event coordinator, decorator, volunteer coordinator, and sometimes you have to clean dishes. Like, it just,
Works out because I'm a clean freak.
she is.
I like to organize things.
So
It's
this
been
one
very
goes down a
nice.
rabbit hole of organization, where I'm like, no, go back to your desk.
We have a time limit each day I'm allowed.
Yeah.
What do you
No,
think about
actually,
the trend of, online, there's the people now that are job minimalists who, when they sign on for a position, if it doesn't say
Yeah.
anything, that they'll walk by their garbage can that's full and they refuse to touch it and empty it, or they refuse to wipe their desk off. Like, that is a whole thing that has gotten very popular, and it's very difficult to mitigate that, because when you say, like I say in my job, this is your job description, like at the lodge, you're the chef plus lodge support, so I cover everything of that. But there's so many jobs in corporate America where little things like you wouldn't think of, that people are refusing to even help or cooperate or with. It's.
Combination.
That's
Yeah.
why that's why when I interview, I'm so specific about how much of a range there could be on the job. That there's so many other things beside your job that you're going to have to participate in, and I need somebody who's going to be flexible and understand that, because we have to work nights, we have to work weekends, we have to work holidays. We'll never have a 4th of July.
No.
We never get the day after Thanksgiving. We don't get Black Friday shopping. Like, this job is very demanding, and now I think it's reasonably paid, but it wasn't previously, and I don't think it was also discussed as much, because there were times that I heard from staff that were here before I was the ED, where they were like, well, I've never had to do that before. And I was like, okay, but you do now. So I don't want to be here on those days either, but those events have been in place for 20-something, 30 years. Like, we're not changing them. So that causes outrage. But you have to find people who are flexible. Otherwise, they were not gonna, there's no way I would ever go with that, of somebody who was like, I will only do A, B, and C, and then I will leave at 5. And I'd be like, ooh, okay, you need to find this isn't gonna work for you.
Right.
So again, it's about transparency, it's about being very open and what you expect, because even if you don't get enough people to apply based on then that just means that you need to put more effort into your hiring plans. You don't just hire someone because they fit enough of the spots, because you're stuck with that person after that, unless they do something really wrong, right? So hire the right people first, as best you can. But if you already set up a low expectation and you don't tell them everything that you're going to be asking of them, then you've set yourself up for failure, because you're the person who's going to have to replace them when they are like, I don't want to do all that. That was never discussed. So, and I said, what were you going to say?
You covered it.
Oh, what was it?
No, in hire,
Yeah.
you can avoid those things by hiring the right person. Like, and making sure they know. Like, if there's a trash can and the cleaning lady hasn't come yet this week, you can empty it, and you're expected to.
Well, and then there's other things that happen too. I had surgery.
Yeah.
We have a restriction. Like, there's restrictions, and sometimes you have to pick up the slack, right? But you should be in a situation, again, if it's a good environment and it's already there, if you need to help somebody else for a certain amount of time while they're going through that, like, you'd hope that you have a team that will come together and find that, and if not, then you're gonna have failure, because you can't keep managing that style for too long without it imploding, or before you quit yourself, because sometimes it gets too toxic for the person who's running it. Whether they made that situation themselves or whether it was given to them, all that stuff has to be resolved at some point. We don't have time. Oh, let's see. Adaptability. I am a very stubborn person. I admit that fully, constantly. I think it's very important, especially as I get older and I realize how stubborn I am, that I open myself up to my staff's ideas more thoroughly. So whether or not I go with their ideas or not, I at least entertain what they're talking about. So events, different ways to market, stuff like that. If it's an instant no, I will give a reason. If they have something to explain why, because I'm pretty good at this, actually. She'll come to me with an idea, and I'll be like, no, we're not doing that. And then she'll ask why, and then I'll tell her, I'll give her an answer. It's never just because, no, it's not how we do things around here, or that's how we've always done it. There's usually a very specific reason. If what I say doesn't match what she says, she'll clarify what she was talking about. And usually this has to do with something with marketing, right?
This happened the other day where
Yeah.
I didn't explain it well enough to you. So you said no, but you didn't actually understand what my idea was.
Yeah.
And then once we clarified, we're like, oh no, we're on the same page.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, no, that makes sense. Move forward with
Yeah.
that, right? But again, all this, I know I sound like a broken record, is communication, right? But you have to be able to adapt and change and move forward with others' ideas as well. You cannot just be the dictator of an organization. Am I a dictator? Sometimes. I mean, honestly, I know it. And I have a board of directors. But if there was an actual concern, which I've been told no before for things, and I listen because that's my job. Overall, they can hire or fire me, right? But again, if they say I should do something and I'm like, I don't want to do it, it's not just I don't want to do it. It's, I don't want to do it because we don't have enough staff time. Where would the funding come from? If this is something that the board wants me to implement, can you provide me with more detail beside, we'd like to do this, because I don't have time to necessarily recreate a massive intervention that the board has decided they want to do. But it doesn't mean that it's completely out of the question. Just like if the staff was like, I want to do a St. Patty's Day event, I'd probably say no. Why? We have 8 million events going on. There's already a St. Patty's Day event in Soldotna. Do we really want to compete with that? And then if they were like, well, we would like to partner with Soldotna to do something, then it changes the conversation, right? But you have to be open to even hearing the conversation. So I always like to just say, even if you know exactly what you want to do, exactly what your path is, you should still be open to listening to what ideas are presented to you, either from above, from below, and then figure out the details of if it's something that's even doable. But still make sure that your staff feels heard, because again, they'll stop coming to you. If you always say no, they'll just stop. They won't bring their ideas because they won't feel heard. Yeah.
As an employee of you, I would like to add, this is actually something that previous managers have not done well, but you actually do really well, is that I actually don't mind a no from you. I will keep coming to you with ideas because you never just say no and leave it. And the reason that you give me if it's a no makes sense. So I don't have a problem with the no. It's never anything about me. It's not against me. It's just that maybe the idea didn't work because of something that I didn't know about because I'm an employee. And so I think if you're explaining why, you literally could tell your employees no every time. And they'd be like, that makes sense. On to the next idea.
But I love the ideas. Like, I love getting them. Because there's always stuff I don't think of. It's impossible. You can't be the only idea person, right?
Correct.
But also, you have to think, you're literally the person who is like, is it feasible? Like, yeah, it'd be cool, but can we do it?
And sometimes I think in our office, there's ideas that are presented and maybe the timing's not right, or maybe it is right now. Maybe this was something we could do earlier, or couldn't do earlier, but we can do now. But I think for me, sometimes I will let my staff kind of, yeah, you guys want to try that? There's no major obstacles why we can't. But then I'm also willing to come along later and go, okay, we tried that and it's not working. And vice versa.
Yeah.
You know, my staff is like, I want to do this. And so wherever the idea comes from, the opposite party needs to be able to say and pull the plug if necessary. Like, okay,
yeah.
we did try this. I loved this idea, but here's why it didn't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why can't I have one?
Yeah, and I will always admit when something of mine just like was a giant flop. Like, gosh, talk about free family movie nights. Who doesn't want free family events on the Kenai Peninsula? It's what we hear all the time, right? We want free events for our kids. We want it, we want it, we want it. Well, we did it on Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Well, we don't want it then. And I'm like, okay, well, they're already bought. Like, you buy the rights for that day. You don't really change that. So we did it to see if it would ever grow, because, new things also usually take time. It just kept getting worse. Like, you'd be here with like 2 people for a movie that we paid for. So
Like 2 families, and we paid $150 to show that movie.
right, and staff time and just everything.
Yeah.
Like, well, I didn't really want to watch, this movie today, but I guess I am because we're open. Yeah, and so we moved it to Fridays, and I think the Friday in January was bigger, right? Still slow. No, it wasn't bigger.
No,
Never mind. It's just a
December was
failure.
actually bigger.
I'll call it. No, but we paid for the movies for a year again. Most people said they wanted Fridays or wanted a weekend,
Yeah.
so we moved it to Fridays, and
Yeah.
now we're just gonna see if that works. But I can admit, it's been a flop, unfortunately. I
Yeah.
don't know what to do about that. But that was my idea, and it went.
What did they have in mind? A Nerf?
I don't know. But
Maybe we need to market it differently.
So what do you do with employees that aren't good at taking direction?
Oh.
You'll find some that there's different, people respond to the person of authority different. And there's some people that are really opposed to having someone tell them what to do.
yeah, those people don't actually work for me very long. Because again, I do really like communication, and I do have high expectations. So that again, it's figuring out what motivates people, and eventually, again, if you can't ever resolve it, you can't ever find a mediation pattern, and you can bring in outside mediation to try and, it's almost like a therapist for staff, right? To be like, what does that person need to get direction? And at that point, if you still can't figure it out, it is what it is. We're in an at-will state, and as horrible as that sounds, they're not a right fit. Like, there's a point, if you've tried every single thing to lead someone in the right direction and give them every tool possible, and you even have tried, like I said, outside sources, you can't say you didn't give it your all. Like, sometimes 2 people do not mesh right. And that's when you have to realize that that's a hindrance on your business, and let that person go and find somebody who can do it. And that sucks, but that is what it is at the end of the day. Otherwise, you're hindering yourself. Like, and it's, this isn't my business. I run it, but I can choose to run it on the ground or have it successful. So, and what do you want to go to every day?
Right. That's a mandatory question in every interview I have with are you able to take direction from a supervisor or a coworker and follow through on what is asked of you? And once I get their answer and they say yes at that interview, I brought it out of their file when they're being defiant and say, did you not answer yes, you can take direction from a coworker or your supervisor and follow through on what needs to be done for operations to run smooth. And they're like, yeah, okay then, why are we having a problem today? You know, and then they have to fess up. They said that they would do that, so now they have to do it. And it's saved me so many times. And people, they get, okay, I can't get away with this. I just don't feel like working or doing or listening to that person. Well, guess what? You still have to get along with people to make things work smooth. So,
Especially in hospitality.
If you can't listen to a coworker or your supervisor, you're not going to listen to any of my guests, and you're in the wrong place because these guests are all going to come up to you and want something different.
Right, yeah.
So,
That messes with reviews.
what's that?
Reviews.
Yes, reviews are fun.
I do think that like it's important to meet people. Everybody's different. Like the way I receive something, or I like Sam said, like to know your people. And I've had people where I thought that they were maybe being like defiant or just not taking anything I said seriously. And then in having a conversation, you learn the background behind it. And that was like a big like, oh, like maybe I didn't really know them or like how they do things. So I try to not jump straight to like, oh, they're doing it to be defiant. Or
Right.
Yeah.
I try to know like the why behind it is always like my motivator with people, especially because they're not physically here, so I can't really see their face.
Yeah. I've had employees that one in particular just came to mind was, he was this great person, so good with people, but could not take direction. And for 5 years, I tried to keep
5
him.
years.
Yeah. For 5 years, yeah. And he would do things like take off in the middle of the night with one of my skiffs and run around the lake, and I'd have to worry about it running out of gas and him wrecking the prop, and then the next morning we wouldn't have that piece of equipment available. And I couldn't get him to stop doing that. No matter what I did, I kept thinking, okay, it's because his sister committed suicide. It's because, I always tried to give him reasons, and always trying to work with him, hey, you can't do that. You know, this isn't okay. But he was so great with people over here, but then had this whole thing over here that it finally got to be just, he's never going to change. And luckily he got another job, so I don't have to.
You didn't even have to deal with it.
Well,
Good.
the first thing is he got another job and then, of course, lost that job because other people won't put up with that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then finally this year he's, 32 years old and he's finally doing the adulting thing. But it's very interesting how people can sit there and say, oh yeah, I'm good at taking direction. I enjoy, getting direct, a direct communication on what you feel that I'm doing right or wrong. But when it comes right down to it, no, they don't.
Yeah.
They want to hear that what they're doing is perfect, and they don't want to hear, and a lot of times, like, not saying a woman in business is where that runs into, but when you go back to I was 18 years old, like I said, I had 380 employees. It was in a male-dominated industry. There were only 2 women there, and I was in charge of, and so it made it different, where I kind of thought, oh, you got to tread lightly when you're giving these directions, not only because you're young, but you're female, and you got egos involved, and it's like this whole balancing act, and
It is a huge balancing act.
Yeah.
100%.
and it could be very difficult at times. But yeah, it's just kind of hard when someone can look at your face and go, yeah, I'll do that, and then they go and they don't do it.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Oh,
And you're
gosh,
like,
I
wait a
know.
minute, didn't we just talk about this?
Yeah.
Right?
I'm not talking about you. Calm down.
I know it wasn't me. I know exactly what it is.
Another thing that you don't necessarily think about is in your position, especially if you are in a top managerial position, is your outside influence and how you are representing the face of the company. And that's another one that is probably important, because the way that you represent yourself and the way that you talk to people is also how your staff is going to think they can interact with other individuals. So I always like to kind of bring that up, is that your influence is beyond your direct team. It's to the companies you work with, it's to your volunteers, it's to vendors, like there's so many people that you deal with and have interactions with, and you are representing the business as a whole in that position. If you have a position of authority, you're the representative. So you have to remember that too. Like, you're not always just representing yourself. You need to make sure that you're representing yourself in a way that can be respected not only by the people you're working with and your staff, but also the outside. Because I don't think sometimes that's brought into consideration, is that, you know, especially in small communities, like who doesn't run into 18 people when they go to the store? And, you know, some of those are your friends and some of them are just people you work with on a business aspect, but everyone sees everything. It's kind of creepy actually. But same thing, I mean, even in Anchorage, like everybody knew each other. So you just have to be really careful if you're in one of those higher positions, how you're presenting yourself in public and with those interactions, and, you know, kind of guard yourself, because that can kind of change your entire job and how you're viewed and perceived and whether you're respected or not in the community. So I always like to kind of bring that out there. And then just one thing to wrap up here. I really believe in this, that real leaders don't hoard potential. So if I know that there is a job or some situation that is better for one of my staff, I will give it to them. I will show it to them. Because I know there's only so far you can go, even, like, let's say just here, right? My position is the top position in this business, right? I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. If I saw something that was a better fit for Natalie or Brittany or Sandra, she lives here, she's staying. But Julia, who right now is in Juneau in the legislative aid position, right? For session, like, I would give them that opportunity. I would refer them for those positions, because I don't believe that if you don't have an opportunity for them to move up, that you should try and keep that. Like, why would you wouldn't want to be held back. So if you see potential for someone else to move up, it doesn't matter how much time you put into training them and all that stuff. If you see that for somebody, don't hold on to it. Be the person that helped them move up their career. Like, don't stifle that for somebody. And yeah, it might put you at a disadvantage for a short period of time while you replace that person if they move forward, but think of the ally that you've created in that person as they move forward into a higher position that you'll probably work with in some aspect. And I don't know how many people do that, because it can get really selfish, because it is hard to find good employees sometimes. But I feel like that's so important and vital to being, if you actually want to be considered a leader, is to be able to provide that if you see it. Does everybody understand what I'm saying there? Okay.
I love growing people.
Yeah.
It's the best feeling. That's
It
the whole
is.
reason I do this job for so long. I
Yeah.
love watching them grow.
Yeah.
And they love the opportunity. I've got such a strong staff right now because they're cross-trained from housekeeping to front desk. So they understand the back side of the operations and the front side. And they're able to answer that guest right away on, we can do this for you, you know, so.
And that's something I ask in the interview as well. I don't ask for a 5-year plan. I've always hated that question, even when I was getting interviewed. I don't know. But what do you want to do in the future? I know it's not stay here in marketing and sales at this position forever. I know that. Everyone knows they want to grow. Now, some people don't. Some people are like, this is what I want to do. But that's good to know too, because then if that employee doesn't work out, you're stuck. So you got to think real hard about the ones who don't want to do anything else. But ask that question. How long do you think you'll be in this role? Like, will I have you for a whole year? That's not a bad question, you know? Like, when Liam was in that role, I knew I had him for a year because he was going for an FAA job. I took him for a year. Then I got Brittany. But again, communication, clear expectations, understanding what they want to do. What are their dreams? What are they going for? Are they looking for this as just a job that I have right now, which is totally fine too? Or are they going for a degree to be something else later? Like, these are things that you should know when you hire somebody, so that you're not blindsided too when they just leave for a career in something that has nothing to do with what they're doing. And you're like, I didn't even know they were interested in horse wrangling. I don't know. It's really random.
I'm gonna do that now.
I know. But like, that's something you should ask. Because who knows, you might be that stepping stone for that person if you know what they're going toward. But I think that's really important. With that, I will open up to any other questions, but that's pretty much the whole course for today. Anybody have any questions? Or anything they were looking for in this that they didn't get? No? So I did my job?
Great.
Okay. Awesome.